Secretary, great to have you back. Thank you so much.
Glad to be back. It's been a while.
There's so much to talk about, but I want to start with Cuba. This has been of particular interest to the State Department right now. You guys released a 100-page report on Cuba, calling it the capital of 21st century communism. And this report talks about the fact that Cuba's goal essentially is to erase the United States from the earth. It also details a Cuban spy network that's been undermining American interests. How did we get to a place where Cuba has become so much of a threat, it feels like, again, to the United States?
I think for those who have followed the issue of Cuba, this is not unfamiliar to us, but to the average American, you see Cuba, small country, 90 miles off our shores, 9.5 million people population. What people forget that when it comes to things like espionage and influence operations, they actually are an influence and espionage superpower. If you look at the history of espionage in the United States, Cuba is the only country that consistently has implanted and embedded spies in our system without even paying them. We had an ambassador, a U.S. ambassador, who ended up being a Cuban spy and was recently convicted. We've had them penetrate the highest levels of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Ana Belén Montes was one of the single biggest intelligence failures on the part of the United States and one of the biggest penetrations we've ever had in our system. So, and then on the influence front, if you look all throughout Latin America, every communist left-wing insurgency that's destabilized governments across the region, every single one of them over the last 40, 50 years has found its support, its help, in many cases its birth from a Cuban influence operation. So it was an important report just to highlight the role they play in our country, a very negative role.
The report also links Cuban influence to the rise of Antifa, the riots that we saw in 2020, as well as the surge of radical activism that we've seen all over these college campuses. To the average person, those things, I think, feel generally organic, but it turns out there are a lot of different powers, Cuba being one of them, that are influencing all of these things day to day.
Absolutely. It's the same network of protesters around the country. They were the same people you saw on the streets burning things in 2020. They then flip it around and they become the pro-Hamas protesters, and they flip it around and within 48 hours of Maduro's arrest have pre-printed signs outside the courthouse demanding his release. And then they're out there doing the ICE stuff, attacking ICE agents. There's nothing organic about it. It is funded, it is organized, and Cuba is a part of that network, and in some cases, a critical part of that network, and it's a network they will weaponize against us. And they talk about it openly, about how they will use that network to pressure American policymakers, not just here in the United States like Code Pink, but all over the world.
Critics of this report, of course, are saying, oh, well, these are scare tactics to potentially justify some U.S. military action against Cuba. It sounds like this is something we should take seriously, and this report sounds very real.
Everything in there is factual, and frankly, I don't think they can dispute it. People can argue that we shouldn't do with it, and I know there are plenty of people in American academia and frankly in American press that sympathize with the Cuban regime and have for a very long time. Part of it is motivated by their anti-Americanism, and part of it is motivated by ideological affinity. There are enough people in key nodes of our society, including professors, but frankly, in the past, we've seen people within our own government that sympathize with the Cuban regime. It's the way they get spies without paying them. But it doesn't mean we can ignore this threat. Put aside for a moment my history, the fact that I'm Cuban-American, the fact that I grew up in Miami. This is 90 miles from our shores. A failed state 90 miles from our shores that happens to be aligned with adversaries to the United States is a national security threat to our country.
I want to move quickly to Venezuela. The interim government and opposition leaders there are taking steps towards a possible future with democratic elections. What role is the United States currently playing, and what can you tell us?
Well, the first thing about Venezuela is I know we're not in the era of patience and persistence, but these things take time. You're dealing with a system that's been in place for over a quarter century. So those are deep roots that you have to deal with. It's also a country that faces a lot of problems. I mean, a lot of economic problems, not to mention now they've had an earthquake. So that's why we've always talked about phase one, where our priority was stabilization. We didn't want the country devolving into civil war, mass migration, civil unrest, and so forth. Step two is a recovery phase, which I think we're into. Obviously, the earthquake adds complexity to it. You've got to have a functioning economy. You need to have laws and rules and regulations in place so that investors from America and around the world can go in and safely invest and create prosperity. Ultimately, you have to have transition. At some point in time, there has to be legitimate elections at every level so that people know that the government that's there is a legitimate government chosen by their people. Step one towards that is the national reconciliation. This is a people that have been divided politically for a very long time against each other. And you're going to have to look at models like what you saw happen in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union. And I think the role the U.S. government can continue to play is as a facilitator of all of this.
You've been outspoken for many years about the threat from China. President Xi, of course, is going to come visit here in Washington, D.C. in September. You've had to sit across the table, though, from China's foreign minister. You've had to, negotiate and talk on America's behalf. How have you found in this role negotiating with Beijing?
On the one hand, all the things that China wants to become the most powerful country in the world, and they want to do so at our expense. Obviously, we are Americans. We're not going to allow that to happen. At the same time, they are the two most powerful economies in the world, probably the two most powerful militaries in the world, although ours is further along than theirs, but nonetheless. And I think it's important for two big countries like this, the two most powerful countries in the world, have to have a relationship, have to have the ability to speak to one another and try to deconflict where possible, because it could lead to some really bad things. The foundation of that is the relationship that President Trump has with President Xi, which is a relationship of mutual respect, and they get along. And that really is important, that our two presidents can speak to one another. And it's okay. I think it's almost irresponsible, by the way, to not have direct communications with the Chinese. We want stability in our relationship. Both sides, I think, recognize that there are areas where we're not going to agree, and including areas where we're going to have to compete. Now, there are areas we can work together on. That's phenomenal, fantastic for the world. But I think there's going to be a lot of areas of friction and competition. We have to manage that at the same time as we have to have a relationship with them, but we always have to look out for what's best for America.
Well, it seems like China's been on their best behavior, knowing that President Trump is in the White House. But a lot of people believe that they may be just biding their time in terms of possibly taking over Taiwan. What do you say to that?
Well, I can't speak 20 or 30 years from now. I can say that our position is we don't support any change to the current status quo that exists there right now. We would be against any sort of compelled or coerced change in status. That point was made very clear in our meetings with the Chinese. Obviously, they have a very different point of view. It's a very sensitive issue for them. So again, it's part of that delicate balancing act. Because look, any conflict between the U.S. and China, be it economic or be it military, God forbid, would be catastrophic for both countries and for the world. So we have to manage that, but we can't walk away or forfeit our national interests. So this is the hard work of foreign policy, and it requires every administration to sort of balance these two competing tugs against us.
Well, we hear a lot about tensions with China. We hear a lot about tensions with Russia, with Iran daily. I think Americans probably at some point get very overwhelmed because, unfortunately, the good stuff doesn't make it out there often enough. What would you say, though, about the stability of the world right now, given you're in your position, the president is who he is?
I think the world has always been complicated and tricky. I think the difference now is if something happens halfway around the world in a place you've never heard about before, and it's really dramatic, you're going to hear about it almost instantaneously. I think the world is also going through a period of rapid transformation. I mean, there is clearly a geopolitical reordering that is occurring, and I've talked about this repeatedly. We are, after the end of the Cold War, everybody thought the whole world was just going to become free enterprise democracies and everyone would get along and nation states would no longer matter. And unfortunately, we made decisions in our foreign policy on that ridiculous basis that actually caused us to hurt our country. We started saying things like, we don't care where things are made, let it be made in another country as long as it's cheaper prices for America. And it ended up deindustrializing our country and costing us millions of jobs. So what you see President Trump doing now is rebalancing those things on the economy using tariffs, on geopolitics using our presence in the world, especially in the Western Hemisphere, our own area, neighborhood that we live in. And then, of course, there are legacy threats like the Iranian threat of a nuclear program, which can never happen. The president's been very clear about that. So you have all the old threats plus the emerging new ones, and they're all happening at the same time, and they're happening faster than they ever have before. And it'll be the work of this administration, but it'll be the work of future administrations. Some of these things are going to take decades to work themselves out.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.